Hi, I'm Chris.
And I'm Kelsey.
And this is World's Worst Deaths, the show where we talk about the world's worst ways to die and why exactly those deaths are so horrible. And today's topic is zoonosis. So Kelsey, what is the world's worst way to die from zoonosis?
People generally know about zoonotic diseases, even though they might not be familiar with that specific phrase, right?
Of the more than 1,400 known human pathogens, over 60% of them are able to jump from animal to human or human to animal.
There are bioterrorism diseases that are categorized. Yes.
When has that happened?
Oh boy. People have tried to weaponize Ebola. People have tried to weaponize the plague.
Just like pull a bubonic rat, its pin, and throw it like a grenade.
I mean, that's actually kind of brilliant. That's the problem with bioterrorism. You really don't know what you're getting into. Is that really a good idea to throw rat grenades of plague at people? I don't think so. I mean, here's one. I bet you didn't know this one before, because it sounds so labby. Anthrax comes from sheep and cows.
Because it's on the ground. It's just around, sitting in the grass, in the dirt.
This is a spore-forming bacterium. Let's do a shout-out really quick. Shout out Salmonella, because I'm a cookie dough queen. Are you a cookie dough queen, Chris?
I just made brownies last night, and about a whole brownie's worth of batter I just relished with a spoon.
We've had other outbreaks of that, but in previous years, it was really greens and produce where you were finding the Salmonella and E. coli.
Salads, yeah.
Salads! Mm-hmm. Salads are the devil. Raw egg in cookie dough never did me dirty. Again, wash your damn hands. I don't put cookie dough in my mouth after I handle reptiles.
No.
We should be afraid of these really common ones because there's a reason why they're so common. We're recording this and it's, spring is starting to come out. People will be sending each other chicks and ducklings and playing with little spring animals. Wash your damn hands because these things are so common. That's really sad because I just saw on TikTok last night that the reason why we have cats, I'm a cat lady, is that they evolved alongside us and they just liked our vibe and were like, yeah, we'll hang out with you. But you're telling me that maybe cats have been making us sick from the get-go. I think chlamydia. Did chlamydia come from pigs?
I don't know if it came from pigs, but I do know koalas, by a large number, have chlamydia.
I don't want to be gross, but it is pretty gross. How do you get chlamydia from a pig or a koala?
The list is very short.
The list is short. This is an anti-sex with koalas show. Don't do it.
Hand-holding only.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. If I had a koala, I would give that little baby, I'd be like, mwah. And I know that wasn't cool. It's not cool to kiss animals on the mouth. The top Google result of can humans get STDs from pigs? You cannot get species-specific diseases from sexual contact. But that's exactly what we're talking about, is that these diseases can evolve and infect other species that they once couldn't infect, which is what makes them so damn near terrifying.
Yes, modern examples include bird flu pandemics, swine flu pandemics, of course, Ebola pandemics, and all of these are enabled by unhygienic practices around livestock, around domesticated animals, around the kinds of animals that are sold on markets.
Yes. I think, is it Contagion? Where my girl Gwyneth gets it. And it's they do this wonderful, spoiler if you haven't seen this movie from the early 2000s, they do this wonderful device where at the end of the movie, they go back to show you patient zero, which was Gwyneth, where she went to a restaurant in China and the chef was chopping up bacon or something and then he did one of these and then shook her hand.
It's one of those professional 3-second rinses.
Yeah, I really felt strongly that the message of that movie was wash your damn hands.
If the message of this video is wash your damn hands,
don't make out with your cat. Even though nobody says that that's a way to get a disease, but don't do what I do.
Okay, I'm glad you admitted to it because I have a story about my dog, and I know that's not the great way to start the story. So a few months ago, I had something, a gnarly cold, and as I was on the mend, my dog started getting congested, started getting sniffly, started having these little coughs. I was fascinated by the idea of, did I get my dog sick?
Did you take him to the vet?
Do I need to make some chicken soup for my dog?
I mean, that would be really scary. The one that really does scare me the absolute most is Ebola, because Ebola is rare, terrifying, and unstoppable. I learned about Ebola because it is one of the most brutal diseases that basically destroys every single function in the human body from top to bottom. So fruit bats are thought to be the normal carrier and are able to spread Ebola without ever being affected by its symptoms, as with many bat, chimpanzee, pig diseases. Ebola symptoms resemble a lot of other really nasty, scary, horrible things that you don't want. It can look like malaria, cholera, typhoid fever, or meningitis. You gotta test the blood. That's not important because you have to test everything to see if you've got it. Once you get Ebola, you're basically riddled with it. It lives in the fluids. In our previous episode, we were talking about how fungal spores can live on after something is dead. Ebola, even though it's a virus, it needs like a live host. It can continue to live on, I suppose, and that is
Ooh, that is eerie. In large communities stricken by Ebola, that they will burn the bodies. Is that why they do that?
Yes. You don't want that thing escaping. Somber note, it's really difficult to, say goodbye to a loved one who is dying from Ebola because it is so contagious. It's a very sad thing to have to perish from. The hot zone opens with this terrifying scene on an airplane where it describes a passenger who begins bleeding from their eyeballs. Bleeding is a big first symptom that typically begins in the first 5 to 7 days of onset of the disease. Infected people show decreased blood clotting, and this can include vomiting blood, coughing up blood, blood in the toilet or in your stool, bleeding into the skin, and especially around needle injection sites. Oh, you know what else? If you just give a quick gander of what even is the deal with rabies?
Rabies is a terrifying virus.
It's horrifying. And there are truly just like nice ass dogs chilling out there, just like walking around all foamy in the mouth. Oh boy. And they are suffering from inflammation of the brain, paralysis, anxiety, insomnia, confusion, agitation, paranoia, terror, hallucinations.
Hydrophobia is the weirdest one.
Right. You told me about that in the water episode.
Yes, that's right.
When you're in the later grips of rabies, you are unable to swallow and it makes you really thirsty. And then you start to become afraid of the water that you can't even drink.
That's miserable.
It is fast moving, so the symptoms present so quickly. But what if they present so quickly that like you don't know what's going on? Rabies is like one of those things that we all joke about it because it seems like, oh, who's gonna go and get rabies?
And these zoonotic illnesses, as far as we know, were not prevalent until we started to domesticate animals en masse.
So you're telling me that cave people weren't dealing with like a ton of like illnesses, basically. Like cave people, I mean, they were basically getting killed by they were getting killed directly by animals. They were not.
I would classify getting mauled by a saber-toothed tiger as a kind of zoonotic death.
If cave people had decided to try and eat saber-toothed tigers, they probably would have dealt with a lot more illnesses. But yeah, I think you're right. I think they're mostly getting mauled to death, falling out of trees, getting sucked into tar, and then just suffocating to death. But we're not talking about cave people deaths today.
But zoonotic cavemen as well, I think. Like, if you're living with all these bats, I wonder how much rabies the bats back then had.
I mean, that is actually a fascinating question. Like, the diseases themselves have surely evolved inside their, original breeding grounds.
Well, absolutely, and there have been different eras of viruses evolving alongside mankind and being trapped in time in permafrost. And as the permafrost melts, we are reviving these viruses that are frozen in time. And we don't have any way to defend our bodies from them with either our own autoimmune systems or with vaccines because they're essentially new viruses.
Okay, X-Files, freaking Jurassic Park, like,
Yes.
that is nuts and scary. We're truly living in like a supervillain's fantasy.
Having gone through collectively COVID-19, the whole world has had to adjust and adapt and then push on as if it didn't happen almost. Something has happened to all of our brains because of it. There's no way we are the same as we were.
No,
And
we think about it differently.
absolutely. And so I think the next time this happens, and it will happen, I think, on at least a similar scale within our lifetimes again, we're going to approach it at the onset in a new way. And I don't know if we're going to be better off because of it.
You are so right about that. It's such a trip what you just said. Like every generation, ever so often, we have to deal with a new pathogen because that's just what it is to be a living creature. That's something that we have to biologically, evolutionarily cope with.
And if we're going to continue domesticating animals, industrializing animals, living alongside them, we're going to have to learn how to adapt with zoonotic illnesses.
Okay, though, but like, have you heard all the hippies and the vegans talking about we're running out of cows and meat? Like, are we going to have less zoonotic diseases because we are eating cricket burgers in our next generations? I know, right?
The cynical answer is we'll see less bovine-centric diseases and more insect-centric diseases, whatever those may be. I don't know.
I don't know that bugs and humans like can make each other sick necessarily. I will always want to eat meat and I will always want to eat bugs, but I'm not as afraid of diseases from bugs. I think future generations would, me and my scientific theorizing, will probably have less zoonotic disease fear if they're truly moving towards more a bug heavy diet in the future.
I love that. I want to say that you're probably right. It feels right. I think your setup is terrifying, but I think your conclusion is hopeful, and I like that. Where I landed with the world's worst zoonotic death is a little bit more abstract, a little bit out of line with what we typically do on the show. But with climate change, beyond creating new environments for viruses to thrive in different ways, we're talking about zoonotic illnesses in particular. Climate is going to push en masse all these animal populations into different areas where existing animal populations had never interacted with those pathogens before. So we're going to see a wave, an onslaught of brand new zoonotic illnesses that we haven't even seen yet.
That is horrifying.
I know. In 2022, a big study was dedicated to the link between climate change and zoonosis. And it found that as climate change continues to escalate and push animal populations into new areas and interact with those existing animal populations and humans, we will see a spillover of over 15,000 viruses being spread to new hosts in new environments.
I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, do they know what the hell these are? Or they're just like, there's like 15,000 brand new pathogens out there.
I don't know how you land on that number. I imagine just about any animal population, humans included, of course, have their own insular pathogens. And I imagine the longer those populations stay contained amongst themselves, the pathogens evolve within that population. But then once, say, koalas who have a fun koala illness start pushing into human populations more frequently, we start seeing those koala illnesses transfer over to the human populations. And it's the possibility of seeing not just one new unknown disease begin to affect human populations, but an onslaught across the globe, across different environments all at once. And I don't know how we could be properly equipped to handle any of that all at once. So yeah, I know that's a cop-out, but over 15,000 new viruses all at once, that's the dam breaking. That's sort of the opposite of where you went with this, where we'll get over zoonotic illnesses eventually. I think that will be too much to handle. And I think we'll have new dangers and new terrors.
There's a lot to be afraid of in the future. But no, like, I'm living in the 90s, I'm living in the 20s. 2010s, I'm very afraid of this very specific disease that a 50% average death rate, 25%, 90% of those infected die, mostly due to fluid loss. You heard my description of the fluid loss. Like, you're bleeding out of your eyeballs, you're bleeding into your organs, you're in pain the whole time. You can't see your loved ones because you are so infected. If you're gonna recover, it takes at least 2 weeks, but that's because a lot of the time you're gonna perish pretty quickly. And this thing was out there. It was out there in the world. It still is out there. It lives in the lab. It lives in fruit bats. You have to be completely covered head to toe to bury someone. Like, I can keep going. It is absolutely terrifying.
I think I have my vote for world's worst death from zoonosis. I think it's a slam dunk. My vote for world's worst death from a zoonotic pathogen is absolutely Ebola. Rabies is up there, absolutely. There's something visceral about just being unable to retain any of your fluids. My palms are sweaty thinking about the bats I used to love are now trying to kill me.
Right? Like, Ebola is the classic disease. Like, everything that we were afraid of pre-COVID was Ebola. She's an icon. She's a legend. She was the moment. Come on now.
Virus classic.
When in doubt, return to the classics.
Well, what do you think? I know that was a lot of information, a lot of our favorite cuddly animals becoming our worst enemies, but there's a lot to choose from. What do you think is the world's worst death from a zoonotic pathogen? Are we right? Are we way off base? Are we doctors?
I might be a doctor if enough people believe I'm a doctor.
Comment down below if she's a doctor. This is like a Tinkerbell situation. If you clap, she gets her medical degree.
I'll become the most beautiful, best doctor in the world.
If you liked this, we did this last time with fungal infections. Click that annotation, please. Well, Kelsey, Dr. Kelsey, maybe Dr. Kelsey, thank you for filling my head with so many new terrible ideas.
See you next time.